afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming out today to Unity in the Community. This morning, we're going to have a wonderful conversation with, I would call them, local heroes. And to kick things off, first and foremost, thank you, Modest Minds Foundation, to Bassett and to Fauzia, the president and vice president of Modest Minds Foundation. Their vision is seeing a world where humility, simplicity, and selflessness are valued as fundamental aspects of human character, leading to greater understanding, empathy, and cooperation among all people. Again, unity in the community. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you for sponsoring today's event. Unity Wireless, United Way Project Empower, who's a co-sponsor of today's community event. IGNA Relief, Al Hikmat, Darul Uloom Institute, and Sheikh Shafayat. A special thank you to the volunteers at Steinger, Green, and Finer Injury Laws. I am going to allow this amazing panel to do their introductions. What I'm asking you to do is to give your name, where you are from, and how many years you've been in service.
Good afternoon. My name is Renee Peterson. I'm a captain with the Broward Sheriff's Office. I oversee our neighborhood support team. So when you said where you're from, I'm from Miami, but I technically work for the Broward Sheriff's Office. That is the agency that I'm here representing today. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sergeant Archibald Pender of Pembroke Pines Police Department. I'm currently one of 3 sergeants in charge of the Youth Affairs Unit. I'm also a Miami native, and I'm here to speak to you today. Yeah, and I've been in service for 22 years.
And he's a FAMU Rattler. Just had to add that.
Hi, my name is Amy Sanchez-Zadak. Originally from Miami. I now live in Davie. I am a behavioral strategist for Zadak Research and Development, and focusing on mental health.
My name is Jay Schwartz. I've been a resident of Pembroke Pines for 34 years, originally from the city of Philadelphia. I've been serving the community as an elected official since 2012, and thank you all for being here today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Green, and I'm the Community Relations Coordinator for the FBI Miami Division. And let me say on behalf of our Special Agent in Charge, Mr. Jeff Veltri, thank you for this opportunity to be here. And I've been with the organization for a little over 3 decades, and glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get started. Can you tell us a little bit about how and why you got started in law enforcement?
My history is a little convoluted, how I got started. So I came out of Florida A&M. I graduated with a health information management degree. So I'm supposed to be working in a hospital. I did that for about a year, decided I didn't like that. I was a supervisor at another call center, didn't like that I did that for about 4 years. And it came to a point in time where I wanted to do something that was gonna serve my community and basically support my family. So 22 years later, here I am as a police officer. I basically put in a couple applications, and if I were to say that I started off like, hey, growing up wanting to be a police officer, it wasn't my intent, but I enjoyed it, and this is how I got into it.
So how did I get here? I just, July 1st, completed 25 years in law enforcement. I'm so happy to make it across that finish line. And this was not the plans in my book. Did not dream of being a law enforcement officer. I hear that from some of my counterparts, and I can't relate. But my initial dreams or goals was to serve in some way. I figured I'd be a staffer on Capitol Hill. I'm a military brat. I grew up a little bit of everywhere in the United States and outside of the states. And coming back here, I just always had a love for traveling and service. However, I'm a mom. I have 3 children. My son, whose name is Corey, he's 27 years old. He lives in Denver, Colorado, and I have 7-year-old twins. My son is the reason that I'm here. I became pregnant as a teenager, my senior year of high school, and nothing like a baby that'll change your plans. So I had my son. I did go on to complete college because that was something I strive for. I'm not a Rattler, but I'm a Panther. And I'm a graduate with my master's from FIU. So why I went into law enforcement, somebody says, listen, you need a job, great benefits, and this is a way that you could serve your community, and I do like helping. So I kind of fell into this. 25 years later, I have done so many different jobs in law enforcement that I didn't mean to do, but I think I have my plans, and then the universe and God has their plans, and they know better. So I think I landed exactly where I needed to be at times I didn't even know. We used to work in gangs. We met each other. I was a gang investigator. I've gotten to work undercover, so that was my way of acting without actually acting, and done a lot of great things. So I think I'm here because I'm following my life's path, and I got here stumbling and fumbling, but I'm where I'm supposed to be. So there you go.
And I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Captain Peterson said. This was not the career that I enjoyed today was not something that was an aspiration of mine growing up. It kind of fell in my lap. And I'm originally from South Florida. I can remember I was at MacArthur High School. I graduated from there. An FBI recruiter by the name of Larry Evaldi had come to our school, had talked to the youngsters about career opportunities that had existed with the FBI. In all honesty, did not remember anything that he said that day. But one of the things that was brought to my attention was that the FBI was recruiting typists. And fun fact, I was the fastest typist in high school. Yep, ladies, don't fall out of your seats. I was the fastest typist in high school, and at the time, the FBI was recruiting typists. And so Mr. Evaldi, when I was a junior in high school, had talked to me about what I needed to do to prepare if I wanted to apply for a position with the Bureau. Long story short, I failed the typing test. Yep, I did. But he said, look, everyone, you're a youngster. If you're able to go through the hiring process, the background, we will hire you to be a part of the organization. And then once you come in, you can take the typing test. Well, 35 years later, when I got in, did not become a typist or other opportunities, started going to school. I went to Broward Community College right here at the South Campus, and then transferred to a seminary where I majored in religious education, which has absolutely nothing to do with law enforcement, but it does come in handy if you're working in a law enforcement environment. And so 35 years today, again, like Captain Peterson said, I truly believe that this was orchestrated by God Almighty for me to land where I'm at. And so absolutely grateful to be here serving our community, because this is the thing that we are supposed to do as public servants.
One of the things that everyone mentioned so far is that you guys all believe that God had a plan for all of you, and this is what you're following. And I think that's really cool to hear it from law enforcement, to hear it from everyone, that there's a higher power that literally is guiding you in that position, in your journey, and you're just there for the ride. My sons are the ones that are doing all the camera work here, so I appreciate that, we're gonna leave something for them. And what you guys are doing is leaving something for everyone. What are some of the difficulties that you've had in your job trying to navigate?
That's a good question. How did I wind up here? You can call it a miracle. My father decided that in order to raise us, he felt it was necessary to beat my mother. So when I was really little, that was kind of the first memories of growing up. He goes off to prison. So I basically lived my life not wanting to be him. 1994, I applied to be a police officer because they were hiring. Probably about the same general time frame that Jeff was going through his decision making. So I went to Broward College. Sound familiar? And I did my agility, I did my written. However, I cannot tread water. To this day, I can swim on my back. If I stop, I sink like a brick. So I tried it twice. They caught me toe tapping in the pool. They said, okay, you're out. And my law enforcement career was over. So let's fast forward. I was the first in my family to go to college because I grew up on government assistance. Moved here 34 years ago. My grandparents, my mother's parents, moved to Pembroke Pines in '87, and they gave me a roof over my head. So I attended Barry University with a management degree in business. In 2005, 6, a sexual predator in Central Florida, near the Ocala area, grabbed a little girl and murdered her. So my wife and I started researching sexual predators within Pembroke Pines, and we found them living next to daycare centers, right here in our community. So I'm an Eagle Scout. My mother said that she couldn't, she needed to get father figures around me, so I went, so she stuck me in scouting. My Eagle project was to fingerprint children. And this was 1989, before the DNA kits and stuff like that. So when I saw this, I saw an opportunity to make the community better, so I reached out to City Hall. At the time, Commissioner Iris Seipel, who is, I get the honor to serve with her now, she's the only one who returned my call. And Pembroke Pines became the first city in the entire state of Florida to protect kids against sexual predators. So I'm watching, as they call it in Washington, the sausage mill of legislation. And I just was not happy with what I was seeing in City Hall, so I ran. I lost. Stayed engaged. Some members of the community asked me to stay engaged, so I did. I ran again in 12, and I won. So now I make national news in 2015. Do you know why I made national news? Because I sponsored a resolution for the city of Pembroke Pines to have, to recognize the month of Ramadan. So I was receiving calls from all over the country based on a national radio host who wound up being sentenced federally and then pardoned by a president, told his listeners to call Pembroke Pines City Hall to be outraged. Why would you do that? So the executive assistant was taking a lot of calls that day, that week. And so I told the folks in Colorado and other places around the country, I said, well, thank you for calling. I'll call your mayor and we'll try to get that done over there too. So my life has always been leading from the front. Okay, so what makes things difficult? Nonsense. I was a poster child of being a threat to national security. The FBI didn't investigate me, sir. However, I was accused of being a threat to national security because there's a picture of me embracing my dear friend Sheikh Safayette here at Darul Uloom. So the biggest challenge is getting people to talk to each other. The biggest challenge is to get communities to understand each other. The biggest challenge is to turn off the nonsense and turn on the common sense. That's the biggest challenge. So I hope I've answered your question.
Turn off the nonsense and turn on the common sense.
I love it.
Just thank you for sharing just everything. You have so many gems in there. Just you as a person, thank you. Dr. Amy, honestly, after everything we've heard, I think your resume speaks for itself.
Very kind, very kind. So all of you were sharing how you didn't, this wasn't the path. Mine, I knew. My mother was the community problem solver. And mentors are really the best way for you to decide where you want to go in life. So what you find is my mother was a force of nature. She was a housewife. She came from Cuba when she was 27 years old, loved speaking English, but very broken, loved it, was not shy whatsoever. But everyone called her for solutions. And we never lived in a Spanish neighborhood. We first lived in an all-Anglo neighborhood. Then we moved into a Jewish neighborhood, which transitioned into Black family neighborhood, and now it's known as Little Haiti. And she never moved from there until she passed. So she always wanted to give back to the community. So the key component was that's what I lived for. How do I problem solve like she did? So I went into mental health. So I knew at 10, I knew that that's what I was going to be doing. And what we find is that it all stems from our belief system, from all of us in this panel. Whatever motivates us, whatever fears we have, where we talk about the fears, the community not engaging with each other is simply fear, a fear of the unknown. Why? Because media is incredibly powerful. And if you're always on some form of media, before it was just the news, you are going to believe what the experts say. That's how we are trained. Don't we listen to our teachers from a very young age? So we're told, listen to your elders, listen to those that know better than you. But we're not taught to tap into our gut. We're not taught to tap into our human side. We haven't done that for a while, I think, because, again, we're working out of fear. So that is my focus. When I teach at NSU, I've been teaching as an adjunct professor in the psychology and neuroscience for 27 years. And my students have changed throughout the years. They think differently. They talk differently. They communicate differently. My choice is not to try to bring them into my world. I have to go into their world, figure out how they're thinking, figure out how they're communicating, and then engage in that. And the key component to my engagement is one thing. I need them to trust me. And that's something that's on my shoulders. That's the burden on my shoulders, not theirs. They're walking in as freshmen, sophomore, trying to figure life out, which is incredibly complicated. And I think we all do that. We all do that, especially in law enforcement, where you're walking into a situation which you never know. You have to try to understand, what are they thinking? What was their past experience? Why are they acting? Are they going to accept me? Are they going to be afraid of me? It's so complicated. So when I discuss anything, I want to tap into, what do you really believe? Because that's the most powerful piece of our way of thinking.
Thank you, Dr. Amy. Because I see a lot of youth in the audience and also parents. What dangers and tactics should youth be aware of? I want you to answer first in real life, and then the second question that will follow will be on the internet. Again, what dangers and tactics should kids be aware of on the internet?
The best thing to say is that everybody lives a separate life on the internet. Everybody is not who they say they are. And unfortunately, we've come into a society where the computer, the internet dictates who we are. We'll see people on there and they're showing you what sports cars they drive and everything else when you don't know they're rented. They're taking pictures in front of it, they're not bought. But they make you aspire to, I gotta live like this. So the dangers are there because not everyone, but I say majority of people are living this fake life on the internet. And we as not only the children, but we get sucked into believing this. And we communicate with people on the internet that we think, I've investigated cases where, kids that say, they're my good friend. Well, have you ever met them in real life? And they're like, no. Well, who do you even know who this is behind that keyboard? So to me, that's the danger, is that we're not separating the fiction of the internet with reality of what's really going on out there. And I think as parents, because I've got three adult children and one oops baby that's 10 years old now, that's my thing, is that I try to stay and communicate with them and make them realize that what you see is just like TV. We see cop shows, we see science fiction shows, we see all this other stuff on TV, and that doesn't translate to real life. It's the same thing I tell on the internet. It's what you see on the internet is not the same thing that translate into real life. You see these Instagrams and Facebook and whatever, stuff that pops up, because one of the things we do is that my officers investigate threats that come across to the schools. And the first thing we do is we go to the internet, because a lot of these kids post stuff on there. So to me, that's the danger and the tactics, that you kind of get sucked in by the bling, what's beautiful, what's pretty, and everything else, but you don't really know what you're dealing with. And a lot of us, sometimes as parents, we fail to get them to understand that this is not real. This is not what is really going on. This is not the person who they say they are. How many times have you seen on the news where, some child has been lured to meet someone that they met on the internet, and it turns out it's an adult, but they've now camouflaged themselves as a friend. So
I think that's the part I'm looking more into. A couple of months ago, my daughter was a cheerleader, and they were inside of a Dunkin' Donuts. A parent came in and told them, "Oh, my daughter was following somebody on TikTok, the beautiful TikTok, and she went out with them. She called them her friends, people she met on TikTok, and then she was missing." And again, the scary part about it is she ran up to my teenage daughter with her friends. So how do we know if that really happened or if it was just another ploy to get more kids? The craziest things happen like that. And so in your investigation, while you've been investigating these types of scenarios, are there anything that kids can look out for or parents can look out for, or something that you've kind of seen repeatedly that people may do? Just this is a curious question. I apologize for not giving this in advance. But when you just said what you do, it just made me think about something like that. Are there, and anybody up here, if there's anything that we should find suspicious or that kids should find suspicious when people are reaching out to them?
I want to piggyback on what you said because sometimes we get caught up in the tactics.
Yes.
Here's a problem, and I want to go a little deeper than where you went. Neuroscience, I love, because I think that's at the root of every single thing we do in our human experience. And I get parents who come talk to my son. He's 17, he's going to college, and he doesn't think, he talks to strangers, and you want me to tell him something you haven't done in 17 years over lunch. Here's the problem. Parents, young people, if your kids are still young, take this opportunity. Stop telling your children what to do or how to think, and teach them how to think, not what to think. I have 7-year-old twins, and my son's 27. That's a 20-year gap. I am a totally different parent at 46 than I was at 19. I told my son, don't do this, don't do that. He grew up with a person who worked in a prison and became a cop. Everybody's suspect. I used to search his room. And I was trying to control him, but here's the problem. Your kids go to school. They're online. Online was not the way it was 27 years ago, now that it is now. So parents are struggling to have all of this control when, can I tell you, you do not have all the control. So the best thing you can do for kids and for yourselves is teach your children critical thinking. My girls are 7 years old. I'm not saying it because they're my kids. I'm kind of like a mad scientist. I am constantly I don't have to rewire them. I needed rewiring. I just finished 2 years with the Center for Mind, Body, and Medicine. I had to rewire everything my mother told me. And it wasn't that she did it from a bad place. She did it because it's going to keep you safe. They'll tell you don't talk to strangers, don't get pregnant, get a good job, all the basic stuff. They don't really teach you how to walk through the world and be safe without somebody telling you what to do. And I have raised my children in a way. My son lives in Denver. He is a tall young man, very friendly. I don't worry about him because I taught my son how to think. I taught him, intuitively. There's no manual. We hand out all this stuff, and please take our brochures out back. But build that intuitively so that they know this doesn't feel right. We have all these distractions, and people who get taken in with QAnon, hate groups, they go on all these platforms. You could speak to this. The FBI are constantly in these chat rooms, and the people you're going to find there all fit a profile. They're the Dylan Roofs. They're the people who absolutely did not have anybody to teach them the way to think, the way to love, what feels right. So if somebody tells you on TikTok, come meet me at a Dunkin' Donuts, my girls are 7. They were like, I don't believe you. Who is this person? And I work with adults that don't think at that level. Yep. Think about that. So, and it sounds funny, but it is true. Society is missing critical thinking. We have adults that work in our environments, and their parents have told them what to think, what to do, who to date, how to do it. And when there's no one there to tell you what to do, that is how you get victimized. So please teach your children critical thinking. That way it doesn't matter if they're online, that doesn't matter if they're at a cafe, that doesn't matter if they're taking their first trip on a plane. they will know to keep their bag in front of them. When people are trying to distract you, when someone says you're beautiful, that's fine. Over-complimentative, coming in your personal space. My kids know these things at 7, and I can only anticipate. I'm not going to make them victim-proof, but I'm absolutely lowering their risk of being a potential future victim because they know this doesn't sound right. They're going to think of all the tools in their kit that I gave them to process what's happening right now, do it quickly, and is this a safe environment? And that is totally linked to the neuroscience. What do you think and why do you think? Why are kids afraid of frogs? Probably their parents were afraid of frogs. I'm afraid of frogs, but you know what I didn't do? I don't even let my daughter know. She picked up a baby frog and brought it to me. I wanted to jump out of my skin. But you know what? I stood there and said, that is really nice. Now when she finds frogs in the drain for our pool, she rescues them and she wants to be a vet. I didn't want to pass on my fear of that to her. And I could have, because she looked at me and said, what do you think? And if what I thought was fear, she would have dropped it. Yep. So be mindful of what the fears that were passed on to us that we pass on to our kids, and empower them to think outside of your presence.
I love the critical thinking piece because what we forget is we need to, let's start with this. Let's assess our children. And how do we do that? Watch them make mistakes. Instead of trying to correct it before it happens, you want to watch them to see what are they thinking. That's your baseline, right? When I get my students, they are used to multiple choice questions. And this is kind of an analogy. They have 3 or 4 choices, right? I give them an essay and I say, I need to see what you're thinking. They can't do it. I go, I can't fail you for being you. I can't fail you for what you're thinking. I need your opinion. Challenge the book. They can't do it because they're used to just having things just pick at it because someone's always telling them, okay, pick from these. But I want you to pick and have that critical thought. So that's the key when, and I love what you're teaching your kids because that's exactly it. But we need to know who our kids are first. They're not us. They're not us. Mm-hmm. So they're going to think differently because they're exposed to different things. They have different experiences. They are on social media at what age now? 7?
Yeah, if not
right?
younger. If not
I saw a
younger.
14-month-old just going like this, sliding, and I was like, oh my goodness.
7.5 months because the parents put the photo
They-
of the kid on the internet.
Oh, well,
Exactly,
that's true.
exactly.
They even create a
8 weeks or 7.5 days.
and they create a social media not only for their kids but their pets, right? So this is how we communicate. So instead of telling them not to be in social media, I want to see how are they doing in social media, and then go from there and then create a strategy for them. And keep in mind, if you have 2 children, 3 children, 4 children, they're all different. They are so different. They problem solve different. So, but we fall into this rule of, they're all the same, they're kids, one rule for all of them. It doesn't work as well. So when we take a look at critical thought, that is key to understanding how to help. If I don't know how you think, I can't help you. I need to know those thoughts in the head and how you're going to try to solve it. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong. We may need to tweak it. I work with my students in this thing called life editing. And what I do with them is because everybody says, well, I have to change. How difficult is it to change? Right? So what I tell them is, you don't need to change. We just need to tweak. We need to edit some things. And then they feel more comfortable. They're more open to the idea. You can stay on social media. Let's just kind of tweak how you're using social media, how you're connecting, and who your friends are. I teach an intro to psych class, and my students, I ask them to give me their phones. Do you know what happens? Yes.
Yeah.
A meltdown is a perfect example. And so when they show me their social media, I profile their life, and they go, how did you know that? Are you a psychic or something? I go, it's your social media, but I'm not in it. But everything you like and everything you are is in it. So now someone else is doing the exact same thing under some alias name who's in their 60s and you're 18. So that brings a little fear and enlightenment to them. So we start talking about, okay, what does social media represent? And when I tell them, how many friends do you have? 5, 6? Another meltdown. They know, I have about 3,000, 4,000. Well, let's define friends. Yep. So there's a lot of little conversations, but I need to understand how they're seeing the world. And the friendship piece is huge because they truly believe that these individuals are their friends.
And I was just, great conversation. I'm going to piggyback on what Captain Peterson said a little while ago. And for a moment, I want you to think of, and I don't know if the show is still out there, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Grader.
You all remember that
Yes.
show?
Yes.
All right. I saw that show one episode, and I'm like, wow, I am really stupid because I did not know a whole lot of things that fifth graders know. And the point that I want to make is, with all of the advances in technology, and our kids intuitively, they're growing up with social media, they're growing up with cyber, they're growing up with the internet, and so this is not a foreign thing to them, a foreign concept to them. However, it is a foreign concept to most parents, generally speaking. If you have older parents that are not well informed in terms of the internet, right, and what they should know and what they shouldn't know, and what they need to be aware of, parents are working at a disadvantage. And so what I would implore the parents to do, if you have small children, is to educate yourselves on those social media platforms that your kids, they know second nature. I mean, they know it. The biggest thing that we see, at least in our office, is that parents oftentimes have no idea what social media platforms their kids are interacting on or communicating with or using. They have no idea. And so we have to start, what we try to encourage the parents is, okay, you need to get educated on what it is and what your kids are out there engaged in. And I'll tell you what, to be honest with you, when we speak to young people, they're informing us about the new platforms that are out there that are unbeknownst to us. So if we don't know about it, your kids definitely know about it. And so you have to have those conversations with them and be involved, really intimately involved in what they're doing, all things internet. I used to tell my kids when they were growing up in the house, in my home, I have a daughter and a son, I said, hey, look, in the home, this is not a democracy, it's a dictatorship. And you don't have any rights. Because oftentimes today that we see in our society, we empower our youngsters to have that sense of independency. And so it's not uncommon for kids to go in their rooms, to close their doors, right, to be on their internet, to be on their laptops, and not allowing mom and dad or their guardian in. And I always tell parents, hey, look, you have every right, you have an obligation and a responsibility to know exactly what your children are involved in, what they're engaged in, because there are a lot of bad people in this world that are on those social media sites, and they are grooming your youngsters to victimize them. So I wanted to just make sure that I just kind of mentioned that as well.
The city of Pembroke Pines, through Commissioner Ira Seipel's initiative of Raising Positive Children, is a program, just what was just mentioned here, about how to warn parents, what to look for, the signs and all that stuff. So if you're looking for more information, go to the Pembroke Pines YouTube media site and you can just go and put Raising Positive Children, Pembroke Pines. It's been recognized by the state of Florida, Florida League of Cities, and we are trying our absolute best to replicate this throughout the entire state so that parents know what they should know. Now, for the adults in front of us here, do not raise your hand when I ask this question, but I know that you got away with stuff as a kid. And now that you're raising a kid, you're like, son, I know what you're doing because I was your age once. Well, guess what? They got one up on you now.
Yep.
That's the truth. They got one up on you. So to Jeff's point, it's about having the right communication, having the open door, and we're certainly not going to fix the world today, but you need to talk to your kids. And what are our kids dealing with? Kids today are all post 9/11 kids.
Yeah.
They don't know what it was like to leave your shoes on. They don't know what it was like not to have a microwave or a cell phone or a video game system, depending on how old you are out in the audience, right? But the truth is that this goes back. Manipulation of people goes back to the test of time. If you can control someone's mind, you can control their behavior. And this is how society was built. Every large era of human society has had one country or one king or one oligarch ruling the world. How can you possibly rule people? You can if you manipulate their mind. So that is called political science. Past life experiences is going to predict future behavior. So breaking the cycle of making sure that you're not beating on your kids, breaking cycles of addiction. You know what we have addiction? Who has a smartphone on their pocket? How many times have you looked at it today? That is an addiction. And as humans, we're predisposed to that. So when you see the slick ads, trying to sell a car, 50% off or something that's 300% more than what you should be paying for it, you run for it because that's just human behavior. So police officers, they are trained. They're trained in behavioral sciences. I'm an adjunct professor for Embry-Riddle University. I'm a commercial pilot flight instructor. I teach at a local high school right here in the city. I'm teaching them aviation. But you know what I had to deal with last year? 2 suicide attempts. 2. You know what was shocking? That I didn't have 3. Why? Because every year in the United States, there are more than 100,000 attempts on life. Attempts. Every day in this country. And we have to figure out what the heck is going on.
I knew it would get really deep because that's how the conversation, and it just goes to show you that the hearts are in the right place, which I appreciate, again. And the conversations in terms of the internet and the media and the neuroscience, because I'm a big neuroscience guy as well. I mean, we talked before, and we talked, Amy, as well. We know, like, we've had these deep conversations about, you just posed a very, very important question, what the heck is going on? So actually, that's what I want to ask from a law enforcement and a psychology standpoint as well. Can you please take us to some of the things that you've seen, statistically, if you can back it up as well, that would appreciate, of things that you feel is going on, and then how, from your perspective, we can find some solutions.
Just to put into perspective, Commissioner Schwartz, as you were talking, it just took me back to a moment. A good friend of mine, her son committed suicide. And so everything you're saying is just a lot for me right now because we didn't know the signs and we don't know what happened. And it's just a lot. So I just wanted to give you all a little bit of perspective of why this right here is just a lot for me.
About a year and a half ago, my son attempted suicide, my youngest son. And when I got a chance to talk to him after his recovery, it was during COVID, and there was an increase of suicide attempts during COVID, successfuls, some of them. And I just talked to him, and I thought I was doing a good job as a father. Thought I was talking to him and everything else, and it hurt a lot because he attempted while I was there. I didn't know what he was doing. I was sitting there right on the couch. I had come in from work. I was talking to him. I took a nap, woke up, and what he was doing was he was taking pills and then washing it down with alcohol and mixing the alcohol with tea right in front of my face. I didn't even know he was doing it. He wasn't like outright hiding it, and I don't drink, so the alcohol we had in the house was like back in the cabinet. I got it for Christmas, 20 Christmases ago, and it just sat there. And when I finally talked to him, he said he felt like the walls were just closing in on him while he was at home doing homeschool. And he felt like he had no communication and contact with the outside world. And he said it's got to a point where he couldn't take it anymore. So to kind of back up is, to talk back to what Mr. Green said over there, is that it's communication. It's communication. and you've got to take that hard communication, not just a peripheral, hey, how you doing today, what's going on today. You got to sit down and talk to the people in your lives. You know, going back to what we see as crime with the kids, you know, it's a joke, but you'll see burglaries go up during the summer because kids are out of school. You see burglaries go up on holidays, you know, stuff like that, because, you know, a lot of it is youth oriented. And I can't give you the statistics on it, but I know that it's there. And you'll see, you know, some of the crime rate drops when kids are back in school. So that's one of the things that, you know, as a parent, you say, hey, what are your kids are doing? There's no reason why a 14, 13, 12-year-old should be walking around at midnight unsupervised. I don't care how much you trust them, how much they, whatever. And I'm not saying you got to be the strictest parents in the world, but, you know, communicate with them. And look, I you know, did I sneak out? Yes, we all did it, whatever else, but I wasn't breaking into cars. You know, just the biggest thing that I see as working in the gang unit with the captain over here, and we were, you know, I didn't do all the undercover work. I was more the catch them after they did it. And you start talking, and you start, first thing you go to is, where is the parental supervision? Why are you out here at, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning, able to break into cars? And then you go talk to the parents, and the first thing they say, well, it was only they were going over such and such house. Well, did you call such and such house to figure out if they were going over there? A lot of parents go, no, they just assumed that was going on. Yeah. And to me, that's kind of, you know, not to judge anybody, but it's kind of ridiculous. You know, I'm very wary of letting my kids spend the night out to begin with, and I'm definitely going to figure out who you spend the night out with if I even let it happen. You know, that's just a, you know, a big question. You know, when I growing up, I spent the night at my cousin's, and the one friend I spent the night out with, he lived right across the street from us. You know, I know things are a little bit different now, but again, it's going back to that communication. You know, the first thing you start seeing when you start seeing crime rates go up is, you know, the police department will reach out to the community because you know what's going on. You're the people, you're the eyes and ears, you know what's going on. You know who your people are in your neighborhood, you know who the people aren't. And I can't, like I said, I don't have the statistics for you and say, hey, this is definitely this correlation with this correlation. It's just anecdotally, like I said, I worked in the gang unit, I worked in the crime suppression team, I worked in the burglary suppression team before I went to youth affairs as a sergeant over the schools. And the first thing you know, you start looking at the rates rise is, hey, was school out today? Yeah. There's no school tonight? Yeah, so whatever. And parents, you know, I get it. Some of us work, you know, a couple of jobs and you don't supervise your kids, not on purpose, but there's no one there. But again, it's like the captain said, back is having that talk with them, instilling in them, you know, we can't force you to do the right thing, but develop those critical thinking skills so you will think to do the right thing.
Just from a law enforcement perspective, I think the question also first of all, that was very vulnerable of you to share. So I appreciate that because in our profession, we don't like to seem weak, and we certainly don't want to say when our kids have problems. So there are law enforcement officers whose kids are addicts. They've been arrested. They've had suicide attempts, and we carry this. Like every other trauma, we just stuff it down and hide it. That has to go somewhere. So I can tell you're doing the work by sitting here talking about it. It's so freeing mentally, and I appreciate it. So thank you. And I hope he's doing better now. Being on the scene after MSD, my eyes opened a lot to tragedy. I've seen death. I've seen some of the worst things, but that hit differently. And seeing parents go through it, having a person in the community whose son committed suicide after, survivor's guilt, and not being able to see the signs. So there's a lot to unpack there, but if I could say this, what I found the best person to interview, like how people interview serial killers, people think that's morbid. You want to predict future behavior from other people who are showing these signs. Working in a prison at 21 years old was probably the best thing that happened to me because I got an opportunity to have an audience with people who have been incarcerated. Some of them are never getting out for murder. And I had 8 hours in the prison to ask questions. And it was very profound because no matter what the crime was, a lot of them had the same thing in common. No foundation at home, no way to self-regulate their emotions. And me at this age now making the connection, you know, the thought feeds the emotion starts the action of a physical reaction, whether that's going out committing robbery, an attempt of suicide. I think is so important for a lot of the people that I've arrested they didn't have a way to self-regulate and ask, okay, I recognize I'm having these thoughts. Some people commit crimes for money. So there's the money aspect, and then there's sometimes you're in a bad place. Law enforcement, we are now going out doing more community outreach, and what we're asking of people is find a way to self-regulate before you get there and ruin your life, ruin someone else's life, and your family. Going to prison or jail affects everybody other than the person who's going to prison and the victim. So self-regulation is important, and that's why I respect the work of the FBI and what you do in the colleges, teaching these young people stuff that I didn't even know that I'm learning late in life. If you are a person or you have kids, even something like leaving the TV on, the need for people to hear a noise in the house. That was my house. We always had yelling, people, sit down, blah, 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 and it was loud. And when I lived alone, I always had to go to sleep with the television on. I didn't realize what that was about until later. And it's because most people, your son said the walls were coming in, not knowing how to be alone. Because we're always with people. We're always receiving information, overstimulation. And when you get quiet, all that stuff that you suppress now starts to come up. You gotta find a way to push it back down. And when there's no way to push it back down, COVID, we feel all of these heavy emotions. So self-regulation is so important. Most of the cops I work with, I talk about yoga. First of all, I like stretching. I stretch when I wake up and stand up. But I love meditation. I found a practice that helps me quiet my mind. I no longer need to hear people talking to me all the time. I no longer need to have the TV on to fall asleep. And I love being by myself. And when you can master being by yourself and regulating your own emotions, you won't be impulsive. You won't be tempted to go take drugs and drink or go out and do these things and be in these crowds that get our kids wrapped up in all kind of activities. So I would love to hear what you're saying next, because I think self-regulation is at the heart of a lot of what we can do to change our behaviors for the youth.
Again, thank you for sharing that. How old is your son?
He's 19 now.
19. So when there's so much, and there's so many moving parts when we're dealing with teenagers especially. First of all, when it comes to suicide, I teach a class on grief and bereavement, and everyone thinks it's about death and dying, but it's actually, I try to teach my students how to live. Because they walk the earth thinking that they'll be 90 and 100 years old, and they don't realize that, we have no control over that. So they walk in with one perception, thinking it's just the theory of death and dying, and then they end up realizing, oh my goodness. So their assignment is to write their obituary and to create a PowerPoint on their funeral. That becomes very awakening. And then they have to go to their parents, and there's a paper called The Last 5 Wishes, which is also an awakening of what would happen if they would not be able to share what their 5 last wishes were. And they have to go to their parents to sign that. And obviously their parents don't want to sign that. Why are you bringing me something about your death and dying? But the key component of that class is that they all share the same thing. We do a lot of group work and open discussion, and they're lonely. So here we have all this social media that they call friends, but deep inside in their core, they realize how lonely they are. And that's what leads them to being lost. Now, we all know that the human brain doesn't fully develop until you're like 25 or 26. So when you're 14, 13, 16, 18, 19, you really don't know how to problem solve. We don't even want to meditate. We just don't have it in us. That's not how our brains are formed yet. So it's still consistently forming. Running helps. Why? Because it lifts those endorphins. So you'll see a lot of young people really working out. They're not working out only for their looks, because it's a high. And they're like, wow, I feel great. And then they crash. So we're dealing with a lot of trying to figure out how do we engage them. I have 2 daughters, and one's 26, one's 29. And when they were young, my husband and I made a very conscious decision that we would always be present, one of us. We tag teamed. And I was working on my dissertation. I was traveling. My husband, we both busy, as all of us are, right? We all have our jobs, and we're all worried about our jobs, because that's what's going to put food on the table. But we made sure that we would never miss anything in school or any time. So there was always one of us available. So my daughter's principal called and she says, Mrs. Zadak, you need to have a talk with your daughter. And I'm like, what could they have done? They're like in kindergarten and first grade, right? And she says, they say that you're a stay-at-home mom and that you're always there and call you. You'll volunteer for anything. And she says, you need to share with her what you do. And I go, no, that's exactly what I do. I am present. And if she doesn't realize that I work, because sometimes I was writing my dissertation at 3 o'clock in the morning. Was it hard for us? It was very hard for us. We're tired. These bags under my eyes, I definitely earned. But the key component is that they don't know any better. And they are scared. When I get my freshmen in, they're scared. They've come from different parts of the world. And here they are in this college town called Florida. And they don't know what to do. So they need security. When the hurricane hit, this is a perfect example. I had one of my students say, what do I do with water? And nobody was telling them. So it's like, she goes, I went to Walgreens, there was no water. So thank goodness Davie is a good community too, and I was able to give them certain people that they could actually call, not go online, not do this, because we all know we have resources online, but we need that human connection. Another situation with suicides, men commit more suicides than women. Women attempt more suicides than men by 50% actually. So we have to look at our young men. They're really at high risk. They feel that they need to have the answers, and they don't. They need to be, and this still stands, I have to be the man of the house. I have to be, I have to be the strong one. So the way, again, they're interpreting and seeing things, you can have a conversation with any of your kids, and you go, what are you thinking? Where did you even get that thought? Somewhere, but you need to hear it, right? And that's really painful. I also teach a human sexuality class. That is the scariest class I've ever taught in my entire life, because what you were sharing earlier, they know apps that I never knew existed. So my job is, again, to take all this in, to learn, to sit with them, and then to scare them a little in a very loving way, instead of going, how can you be on this app? How can you do this? How can you do that? It's basically taking a deep breath. It's harder, I tell all my parents, it's harder on you than it is on them, because you have to stay calm and engaged and then create a strategy. It's all about really stopping yourself from that knee-jerk reaction to save and to correct and to teach, as you all were saying, teach. We tell them, this is what we need to do. This is what you need to do. Instead of saying the shoulds and the coulds, you just have to sit back a second and go, okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath and figure this one out, and then I'm gonna reapproach. A good friend of mine years ago, she's a psychologist, and she said, when you really want to talk to your kids, take them for a car ride, because they can't go anywhere. And ice cream, whatever you want, and reward systems are great, and that's where they're going to start opening up. So there's tricks to the trade, but there's so many components to human behavior, and everyone is so different. What I was confronted about pre-COVID was that the new way of disciplining our children was parents were Baker acting them. And I'm sure you see a lot of that, right? They won't do the dishes. So they're emotionally unstable, because now we use mental health as a reason for not acting or following rules. And trust me, we have a mental health crisis, but I think we need to redefine how we define mental health. I have a child that decided in a creative way to take hand sanitizer, and she would continuously sniff it, and so she passed out, and instead of her parents really figuring out what the bottom line was or what the issue was, they Baker acted her. And that, to me, is worse than anything I can think of. And that's the new norm. And if I tell you that out of 17 clients that I have 8 that were Baker acted under the age of 15.
What is one thing again, from each of you, that parents can do to better protect their kids?
I think the most important things that a parent can do, and I'm going to echo what you mentioned, which was so profound, was to be present in the moment. In every moment that you have with your children, you have to make sure that you are present in that very moment. And what I mean by that is, I'm not talking about you're in the room with your kids and they're saying something to you and you're not really you're not following what they're saying. You might be agreeing, yep, I hear you. But are you really hearing what they're saying, right? Are you, to the doc's point, are you really observing what they're doing? Because they're going to tell you, folks, the signs are going to be there. The question becomes, are you really paying attention to what's going on? I'm a firm believer that whatever is on the inside of a person, it's going to come out, right? It may come out verbally, it may come out through their actions, but they're going to communicate something to you and to us. The question is, are we really paying attention? And I would encourage you, not just parents, but guardians, law enforcement. I know that the folks on this stage, we're committed to that. You know, when I'm with young people, I want to make sure that I'm just as much engaged in what they're doing, because I want to be able to pick up on, okay, what's going on, and they will tell you. They'll tell you through their actions or their non-actions. And so I would encourage parents, really, be present in your children's lives, knowing that their minds, their brains, they're still developing, and don't just throw them out there to the wolves and expect for them to figure it out, because oftentimes they don't have the tools in their toolbox yet to do that. And that's why you and I are parents, because that's what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to be there for them and guiding them and providing them with those tools to put in their toolbox, so when they need it, it'll be readily available for them when they do. And you won't have to worry about it. To Captain Peterson's point, she's empowering them, she's educating them now. And she's not going to be as concerned, because she knows the work that she has put in on the front end to prepare her youngsters.
So I see myself as a public servant. So my statement is going to rail against political speech. Society needs to respect each other. I am sick and tired of the lack of respect towards police officers. I am sick and tired of the lack of respect for educators. I am sick and tired of going to a restaurant and seeing a family of 4 having dinner and everyone is staring in their device, not talking to each other. I am sick and tired of the loss of the decline in religious activities. A society that does not have religion is not a society at all. There was a time that, and we're relatively all about the same age, on Sundays you didn't do anything other than stay home. There was no Walmart. There was no 24-hour this, that, the other thing. And if you got bullied at school, that was Monday through Friday, not 24/7. We are a society that is accepting an excuse. So how do we fix this? It's got to come from within. Someone has to break the cycle. Some folks have kids. They shouldn't have kids. They can't even feed themselves and act in society like a civil human being, and yet they're creating even more problems for society, because the Broward County school system is not a babysitting service. I am sorry, you do not send your kids to school so that they could raise them. It begins at home. And 80% of families that do not have a father in the home wind up in prison. That is a fact. So a fatherless society, and again, you could be a biological father or you could be a loving father, 2 separate things. but having a man in the lives of a family unit is critical to the success of society as a whole. So we are at an inflection point in the United States where we're questioning fact and truth. And trust me, it was mentioned already that there are certain groups, due to mental illness, actually believe that is reality. That's what's actually happening. We have to stop demonizing people. Bassett, you're right. Okay, the Muslim community has been for the last over 20 years now, have been attacked by every part of the society. Okay, as a Jew, I don't know, what was it, about 5 years ago, Charlottesville, they're holding the sticks and flags. Like, we are going the wrong direction as a society. So I think the best thing that we can do as a society is to get outside of our homes and having events like this where we're actually going, oh, we have all this stuff in common and understanding each other. That's the purpose of today's event, right? Is to say, you know what are you eating? What are you drinking? What's that music you're listening to? I don't really care about your religious point of views or even your political point of views. That's where we have to go.
When Commissioner Green was speaking, one of the things that he mentioned was being present. I had a good friend of mine actually ask, he has a 4-year-old, and he's acting out already. And he says, I don't know what to do. We try to keep him entertained. And it's like, the question is, how do you keep him entertained? Well, I take him to work with me. I go, when you take him to work, what is he doing? Well, he's on his iPad. So it broke my heart because it's the norm. It is really the norm. So we would have to basically start rethinking the way we do things. So I said, do this. When you go home and he wants to play, you play for that 1 hour. You drop everything. You put your phone away. You put your iPhone watch away. Everything that can distract you or trigger you. Because now, keep in mind, we're talking about neuroscience. So when our watches vibrate, we're like, oh, there must be a text. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. So I said, just be engaged. And he will, as he grows up, he's going to remember that 1 hour. Rather than remember the 5 hours he was with you at work while he was on his iPad, and all he will remember is you telling him to shush or to, stay quiet, or have worse, someone come and take care of him because you have to go do something. I'm gonna tap into a little bit of academia. When we talked about Freud always said that the parent was at fault, right? Which is kind of true. But who's raising our children now? At 6 months old, they're going to daycare, right? So now we have multiple people providing them life skills. And then they come home at about 5 or 6, eat dinner, and go to bed. So you really had, 2-3 hours of teaching your child life skills, values, morals. So to me, it's, again, we go back deep into what motivates them. And again, as Commissioner Green said, the reality is they're showing you the signs. They are telling you, they're actually kind of begging you to look at them, listen to them, listen to me. Listening is the most difficult skill we can probably have, because when I'm speaking, mostly you're thinking of how you're going to respond to me. So you're not listening. So listen to their story. We all have a story. And when you want to share your expertise, you share it through storytelling, because that's what they're going to remember. I will never forget that my father walked in the snow, 5 miles, whether that was a true story or not, but that's the one that sticks to my head, right? And how many stories have your parents told you that you're like, I've heard this a million times? But now we have become them, and we share different stories of our experiences. So storytelling is incredibly powerful, but first you have to listen to their story. How was your day at school? Oh, it was okay, because they're not going to tell you. Okay, so that's not going to work. So then it's like, what did you do in math? What did you do here? Be very, very specific. There's just key components that we just have to be listening. Now, sometimes parenting reminds me of procrastinating. Because how many of you think you're procrastinators? And how many of you have changed because you've known this for decades? And why do you procrastinate? Because it works. Because how many of you go, wow, I did that in 10 minutes and I rocked it. So now you think you're a superhero. So we're not going to change. So when we look at parenthood, we have to call ourselves out and realize that, hey, we didn't do the best. We weren't there all the time, but my kids are pretty awesome, right? So it's kind of a similar technique. We all try to take shortcuts. What we forget is that we're taking shortcuts with humans. And it doesn't work for humans. It works for a paper, it works for a job, it works for a specific target, but it doesn't work for humans. When we talk about something, serial killers or criminals, they study you, don't they? Yep. I mean, don't you find, and you would speak more eloquently than I would on this, but they do their homework. They are patient. They are specific. And that's how we are not. We are not. We try because we have so much on our plate. First thing I ask is, in 5 years from now, everything you're doing, how important is it going to be? But the reason I keep on saying it's complicated is because, again, we have a job to do. We have careers. We have mortgages. 2020 took us, and we're not going to recuperate from that for a while. As humans, not as businesses and things like that. We're talking about human behavior. We took a jolt, and we are still trying to figure what happened. So it's going to take a while, and yes, we can do that together. And these community outings are amazing. I would love to see it in neighborhoods, specific neighborhoods. Not so much going into parks and recreations, but actual small neighborhoods. Because how many of you know your neighbors well? Right? Mine, not very well either. I mean, and I've lived there for 30 years. So, I mean, what's happening? It used to take a village. Where's our village? And so since we don't have a village, now we have to create tribes. So we have to choose them. So when I talk to my daughters, I tell them, okay, we have many tribes, right? And if you visualize it, do the visualization, what we find out is each tribe represents a different community and different belief systems. So when you're going out with someone, you have to understand that your friends do not have the same values. That's a tribe. Would you go for them or to them for problem solving? Maybe not. And if you go into this tribe, how would you behave there and what can you do there? And understanding and visualizing that every single person you come in contact with is not you, has different beliefs, have different values, have different agendas, and that's really an important thing. Then we become extremely aware. So how do we create our tribe within our children and within ourselves? We need it too. We're talking a lot about children, but we're confused. There's too much out there to control. We cannot control social media. They won us. They won. They won. Hands down, they won. Now, how do I join that force and communicate? I had one dad come to me that he calls his son for dinner. He doesn't respond. And he goes, but he's on his phone all the time. I go, so text him. Text him to come to dinner. And that's how they started communicating. If that's what it takes, ripping the phone off isn't going to work. They're going to find something, and God forbid, they're smart enough to get a burner phone. So it's taking a look, and it's just so complicated because there's so many pieces that we would have to fix, and that's not going to happen. So we have to figure different ways of taking a look at who we are first. I mean, we can sit here and I'll give it our advice, but all of you have a specific situation. And if I don't know that specific situation, I would never give you a general advice to do something, but I do say tap into yourselves. I always call my students, forget about your personalities and your behavior. I want to know your soul. Give me your soul. So what they do is the first day of class, they literally draw, I give them crayons and blank papers, and they draw their soul. What do you think I get back? A lot of black. They all think they have black souls. So my job is to tell them, I love that you are and you feel that way. Let's talk about it. I had one, it was all black background, and then a vine, a green vine that went up. And I said, talk to me about that. And then I learned that she had a lot of darkness in her house, and that she was trying to fight it through that green vine. Is that beautiful or what? I mean, to understand what she was going through. So again, everyone has their storytelling. It's complicated. I wish it was a fix. I'm very hopeful. 100%, I think that if we walk away today and we start connecting with our children and our parents and our friends differently by listening alone, that's a big plus.
Unfortunately, the time is limited, and I'm going to have to conclude on this one. And I want to appreciate, Amy, Dr. Amy, what you said about creating tribes. I think we just created a tribe. And we really do appreciate, I mean, I got to know some of you, and it's been such a pleasure for me. I need to know what your life looks like, what your world looks like, if I truly am going to understand, the difficulties and the challenges that you face, right? And same vice versa is you don't know me from a stranger. So when you get to know me, I'll make some curry chicken, by the way. It'll be my wife, but not me, right? So yeah, they're already lining up here, right? Because we should break bread and enjoy food together. It's really important. So I want to thank the audience. But any closing remarks that you guys want to?
Thank you again for having us. I certainly appreciate it. My closing remarks is I'll bring this over from the energy from we did a hate crimes task force town hall 2 days ago, and it was very interesting. It was so many people from the Jewish community, from the LGBTQ community, from the minority community. And what I asked of that audience, and I'm going to ask that of you all, meet people where they are. And don't just show up when your community is affected. I said when everybody there from the Jewish community was talking about anti-Semitic hate crimes, done that, work with ADL. I'm not Jewish, but I care. LGBTQ group has an issue when it's their community. I'm not from that community, but I care. As a black woman, I don't want people to only show up when they look like me. I want my brothers and sisters to show up. So care when it's not you. And when I say meet people where they are, meet people where they are. If they're a young mother who was a teen mom, who was very judged because there wasn't a husband in the household, meet people where they are. I raised some awesome kids, and I'm so happy to say that, yes, statistics, you're right. When you don't have that foundation, chances are that could happen. But I knew intuitively I had to do something, and I wasn't going to allow that. So I'm not a PTA mom. I give them my money. I can't give them my time. But I give my time to my children by having dinner at a table with no television. My kids meditate. Would they meditate without me because their brain's not there? They meditate because they know that's my practice and they like sitting and breathing with mommy. So you can defy the odds if you don't look like the picket fence with the 2 people in the household. Don't let that define you. Anything is possible with the right tribe and the tools in your toolbox. And love trumps hate. Stay in your light. Do not get pulled over to the media darkness, the negativity, the gossip. I don't care who and what religion you serve. I love people. And that is my practice, kindness and love. I'm passing that on to my kids, and I ask that you all do the same. Meet people where they are, even if they don't look like you. Thank you.
There's more that unifies us than that divides us. I just had a class about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about that. And if you look for that divisiveness, you're going to find it. But if you look for the same thing that makes you human with everyone in here, then you'll find it. And when I say that is everybody wants to live in a safe neighborhood. Everybody wants their children to be successful. Everybody wants to, be successful in that sense. And everybody wants to be happy. So if you get in that echo chamber where everything is bad, everything is wrong, and you do listen to those people, you're gonna find it. You're gonna say everything, this black person is wrong, this gay person is wrong, this Jewish person is wrong, this Muslim person is wrong. You're gonna find it. But if you start looking for, hey, what unites us, you reach out to the person that lives next door to you, you reach out to the fellow person in the community, and you start finding out that they have the same fears and the same wants that you want, and you'll see that unite. So the easiest thing I can say is the communication. Communicate with one another. Talk to one another. To give you a little background, I've probably practiced every single religion. At one point, I was Muslim, practicing Muslim for 20 years. We converted back to Christianity, nothing against the Muslim religion, but it was a journey for me. And during that whole process, learning different things about different people and learning and accepting them for who they are and learning their backgrounds and cultures and everything else. But even though there were certain things that are different, we're the same. So at the end, it's communicating and learning that, again, there's more that unites us than divides us as a people.
3 words come to mind: courage, wisdom, and serenity. Those are my favorite. So I hope that we all leave with the courage to listen, because listening is tough. Sometimes we hear things we don't want to hear. And then the wisdom to know what to do with that. And sometimes it's nothing. Just, stand down and think it through. And then serenity, which is absolutely knowing that there's a solution to every problem. It may not be the ideal one or the one we wish for, but there is hope in everything. So stay peaceful within yourself, and then, the answers will come to you.
My mother taught me in life that all you have is your integrity, that your word means something, and give back to your community. So this is what I'll challenge each and every one of you. Make tomorrow better than yesterday.
Just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Bissett and to Modest Minds for the opportunity for us to be here today. And to our panelists, my fellow panelists, thank you so much for this. This has been phenomenal. Thank you for the vulnerability, the education. This has been absolutely phenomenal. What I would leave you all with is this. We can move together as a people, but we have to make sure that we're moving together all together. It can't be just one group or this group or that group. It has to be all of us together. So I leave you with that. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I'm looking forward to some of Bassett's wife's curry chicken.